How do you separate fact from fiction? In a tech world full of hype and hyperbole, how do you get beyond the marketing muck to understand how a new technology really works and how you can use it to get things done? For enterprise technologists and independent developers alike, this has become an essential question as it relates to what may be one of the most overhyped technologies of our time, blockchain. Hello, my name is Charles Araujo, and I'm principal analyst with industry analyst firm Intellyx, and I'm an author, speaker, and futurist examining the future of technology and its impact on the world around us. Today, I'm here with Daniel Riddell, CTO of Cadoodle TV and ambassador with blockchain pioneer Decent. And together, we're going to try to help you get under the technical covers and make sense of blockchain. Hello, Daniel. Thanks for being with me here today.
Thank you, Charles. It's nice to be here.
So before we get going, I should probably set expectations a bit more clearly. To say that we are going to get under the technical covers together is a bit of it's a big overstatement, because in truth, this is really going to be all you. As an industry analyst, I follow blockchain, but in many ways, I'm probably in the same boat as many of our viewers. I know enough to be dangerous, but I've never really gone too deep under the technical covers. So I'm really looking forward to learning today along with everyone that's watching. And before we kind of dive into the technical details, so to speak, I want to set the table a bit. As a developer, whether they're independent or whether they're in an enterprise, why should someone who's watching, a developer who's tuning into this, why should they be worried about getting under the covers in the first place? Why is this actually important to them?
Well, it's a great question, Charles, and I think it's one of the most important technologies, emerging technologies of our time. Blockchain is really the enabler of what I call real-time resource management in our future economy. As we become more and more automated and we see more and more automated systems and automated billing systems integrated to those systems, a need for an underlying technology layer like blockchain, which is trustless amongst parties, is really necessary. The example that I like to give to people is when you turn on the lights in your house or in your office, you're not being charged in real time for that usage of energy, so to speak. You get a bill at the end of the month and you need to settle that bill. In the future, when you turn the lights on, your blockchain ledger will start draining funds. And when you turn the lights off, your blockchain ledger will stop draining funds. So really, it's the way that we tie economic systems to automated systems.
Okay, well, beyond maybe scaring me a little. So from a career perspective, again, developers can go a lot of different ways. I mean, why is this important, from their perspective? Do you see that everything is going this direction? Is that really why?
Yeah, I really think that there are a lot of aspects of our society which are moving in this direction. Autonomous vehicles, for instance. When we have autonomous vehicles on the road in the future, how are all of these different vehicles from different manufacturers going to be aware of each other's proximity, each other's perhaps issues? Maybe you have an engine issue or something like that and the car needs to come off the road. The way that we're going to collaborate this information and grant access to it is through technologies like blockchain, where unrelated third parties, whether it be Ford versus GM versus Fiat versus Renault, they're going to need some common information layer where they can push the autonomous vehicle information and other autonomous vehicles can read that information and make decisions upon it. So, the need for public blockchains, blockchains which are not controlled by any central authority is definitely needed in this new future.
So I know you are obviously work for a blockchain company, and you obviously therefore are big on this. But this is still a bit of a controversial topic to a certain extent, right? I mean, how big do you think this is really going to be from your perspective? I mean, where would you put this on kind of the scale of things?
It's right up there with artificial intelligence. So, blockchain is definitely huge. When you look at technology and you look at where it's come from, you can really see the importance of blockchain technology. So, the World Wide Web, the internet, was developed on what's called the HTTP protocol. And version 1 of the protocol basically allowed you to access resources on the internet, whether that be your email or certain types of information. And then, we had the likes of companies like Facebook and YouTube come along in the mid-2000s to later 2000s. And these companies developed what are called APIs, application programming interfaces. And what these APIs allowed for was they allowed for people unrelated to Google or Facebook to build a new product on their information stack, so to speak. So by accessing these APIs, you could build some new product or functionality. Blockchain protocols themselves are being termed Web 3.0, essentially a protocol layer that allows for interoperation between applications or digital entities and settling the transactions related to those interactions between the entities. So really, when we're talking about blockchain, we're talking about the evolution of the internet as a whole and making it more open and accessible to everyone. It's really the democratization of the internet, if you will.
Interesting. All right, great perspective. And I think that's a great segue for getting into the technical weeds a bit. So for those that really know very little about this, can you lay out the fundamental architecture of blockchain? What exactly is it and how it works from a technical perspective?
Sure. So from a technical perspective, a blockchain is really a distributed database in which you aren't able to alter or change existing records. So, and more than just a distributed database,
so those are the blocks, like a database record then is the block. Is that what that is?
Well, yeah, the database record would be the block. A block could contain a number of transactions related to the ledger or the database, if you will. And the key component of blockchains is that unrelated parties, known as miners or nodes in different ecosystems, essentially process the incoming transactions to the blockchain and commit them to the blockchain based on very strong cryptography and mathematic principles. So it's essentially like saying, once a block is committed, it is 100% true. There is no possibility that it's untrue. And this is achieved through complex cryptography. So, traditional databases, you have 4 different operations you can do on them: create, read information, update information, or delete information. In a blockchain ecosystem, you can really only create new information or read existing information. You have no way to update previous transactions, and you have no way to delete previous transactions. What this does is this creates transparency and it creates trust amongst unrelated parties that may be using any given blockchain. Because we can't delete, because we can't update or fake a transaction of the past, and this is secured through cryptography, it really lends to all sorts of different companies and entities and people participating in the ecosystem. So
that's what we broadly call then immutability, right? This idea that it...
Yeah, it's one of the key components of any blockchain.
And it's one of the things that makes this different from the traditional distributed database models that we already have in use today, right? I mean, the fact that you can't update or delete. But I guess the logical question then is, so when, I mean, if you have bad data, the data is incorrect, so you just supersede it in another record of the blockchain? Is that what's happening?
Well, no. I mean, what happens when miners of a given blockchain mine the transactions? The previous transactions contain information in them, and the new block always contains what's called a hash of the previous transaction's information. It's kind of like a way of adding a signature to the block and saying that it's true. So there really can't be false information committed to the blockchain. So in the Bitcoin ecosystem, for instance, when I launch my wallet, it reads from the blockchain the data of my particular account, and it knows how much funds I have to spend, so to speak. And if I do a transaction of Bitcoin to you, that's broadcast to all of the miners on the network. And those miners basically race to do what's called calculating a signature or a hash of that transaction. And that signature or hash is based on a mathematical algorithm, which is proven to be uncrackable. It's cryptographically secure. The first miner to successfully find that signature or hash commits the block to the blockchain, and then other miners validate that hash. They come back and they say, okay, yes, it's correct, it's correct. And after a certain number of confirmations, and it's different depending on the blockchain, the information is committed in an immutable fashion. So it can never be changed. It's just accepted as correct.
Okay, so this is really about a completely different approach to a database, really, and doing in this distributed, immutable, and therefore trusted or not having to have trust sort of model. Is there anything else that makes this different then?
Yeah, I mean, when you're working with a blockchain ledger, you're working within an existing predefined protocol. So the Bitcoin protocol, the Decent protocol, these have different operating rules, if you will, and different types of data which can be stored within the protocol. If I'm making a distributed database, I have the freedom to create the data types, to create the field values of my database, and to read and write and update information from that database accordingly. When you're working with these protocol level ledgers, and that's what they are, they run on protocols, you need to follow the rules of the protocol in order to process the database transactions.
Got it. Okay, so I think I'm starting to get my head around this a little bit, and I think you already started to answer this, but so given everything you've just said and this immutability and the distributedness that are sort of core to blockchain, how does this start to change then the way I think about development, or as a developer, I think about development?
Yeah, well, I think when you're talking about development in general, I mean, I'm also CTO of a service called Cadoodle.tv. It's one of the world's largest streaming services for children. So we're an ad-supported model, kind of like YouTube Kids, and have a lot of premium content like Netflix. Within our business, we have a number of different silos, so to speak. We have a billing silo, a subscription silo, a content processing silo, a user data silo, and each one of these silos is termed a microservice. And these microservices tie together under an overall application architecture. When we're talking about blockchain technology, we're talking about another microservice within your toolkit. So for instance, if you have transactions and you want to have automated billing of some resource, right? You would have your centrally controlled database, which manages these resources and distributes them accordingly. And perhaps you want to use a microservice that does the transactional side, you know, the settlement of payment side as a microservice using maybe Bitcoin or Decent blockchain. You could construct your application in such a way that it's almost like Lego, where you can take the pieces of your business that exist today and you can marry them with this new piece of technology called blockchain.
Got it. And I don't want to dwell on this, but I know there is a lot of talk when we're talking about blockchain about performance challenges or speed of transactions. Does that fit into any of this, or how are you seeing that part?
Oh, for sure. I mean, depending on the application that you're developing, you may have a need for very, very high transactional throughput. When we're talking Decent blockchain, it's built specifically for digital media distribution. So basically any file that can live on your computer can be transacted securely and safely using the Decent blockchain. When we talk about marrying that blockchain to a service like Cadoodle.tv, Cadoodle.tv literally sees, you know, tens of thousands of requests per minute. And we may have the need to push through a very high transactional volume on the blockchain in order to process and authenticate all of these content transactions. So it's important for us that if we're integrating blockchain, that we use a technology like Decent, for instance, which has a low block production time, 5 seconds, and a very high transactional throughput. So over 2,000 transactions per second are possible today on the Decent blockchain. Just as a point of reference, the Bitcoin blockchain processes on the order of 15 transactions per second and takes approximately 10 minutes to create a new block of information.
Okay, so you're hitting on something that I think we need to dig a little deeper into because, you know, and I'm probably as guilty as this as anybody. We throw around the term blockchain like it's this one thing, but in fact, it's this really kind of broad term. And there's a lot of choices that you have to make, both technically and architecturally, as you start going down this road. So you've touched on a little bit of this already, but can you walk us through what some of those considerations are, the different things you should be looking at?
Sure. So, I mean, in blockchains, there's all sorts of different types of blockchains, as you've illustrated. There's some blockchains which are based on what's called, well, let's just step back a second here. So the differentiation of blockchains largely comes from the method by which they achieve consensus. So agreement on information that's committed to the blockchain. Different
validation process you were talking about earlier.
Yeah, exactly. With Bitcoin, that consensus is termed proof of work. And so essentially it's solving these complex mathematical algorithms, proving that you've done the work to solve this algorithm and committing the block, and in turn mining the next 12.5 Bitcoin today. The halving event is a year from now, and in 1 year, the miners will only get 6.25 Bitcoin for every block that they commit. But so that's one consensus method. With Decent, we have a different consensus method called delegated proof of stake. So it's a much more what I would call democratic consensus method, in the sense that it's kind of like how a company votes for its board of directors. So anybody who holds Decent token has the ability to vote with those tokens for their chosen miner or witness, as we call them in our ecosystem. And the top 33 miners, based on the votes of the Decent token holders, are the validators of the transaction. So it's kind of like taking your stock in a public company and voting for the board of directors who make the important decisions for the company, right? What this allows for is it allows for us to get rid of the proof of work component, which is very time consuming. We can say that we voted with our tokens for these people, therefore we trust that they're going to do good by these transactions. They're not going to alter them, right? And they have the freedom to commit these transactions very quickly to the blockchain, which allows for a high transactional throughput. So, many thousands of transactions per second are possible in these delegated proof of stake consensus models. One of the drawbacks to that type of consensus model is that not anybody could be a miner. You would have to have a certain number of votes from the community in order to be a miner. So it can be considered to be less decentralized or more centralized than an alternative coin like Bitcoin, where literally if you have the money to go out and buy the mining hardware, you can hook it up to the network and be mining. You don't need approval from anybody, so to speak.
Right.
Yeah.
So as a developer and you're kind of looking at this landscape, are there specific things then that you should be, how do you make the decision then of on what platform you're developing with or on, or, how would you approach that?
For me, the decision is based largely on a number of factors. Technology first and foremost. I have to have an understanding of the underlying technology that a given blockchain protocol is using. That's one of the reasons that I really like Decent, is that I come from a media and entertainment background. I understand the pain points in that world, whether it be content piracy or trying to settle billing amongst multiple advertisers. There's really a need to integrate blockchain technologies into the media industry as a whole to provide that security to content creators and that transparency to publishers and advertisers. The most significant reason for picking Decent would be that they've been around for a long time. They've been around in a long time in blockchain is, they've been around for years, not decades. So they've been around since 2014, the project got going. They have a very well-documented protocol. So I can go to docs.decent.ch. I can look at all of the specifications of their protocol. I can look at all the ways that I can do content transactions. They have multiple software development kits. So they have libraries in JavaScript, they have libraries in PHP, and so on. So as a developer, if I'm trying to integrate blockchain technology, I really want it to fit my problem and my need and my current service architecture. And Decent really checks all those boxes for us. Yeah.
Makes sense.
Another really important point, Charles, is the ability to talk to people on the core development team or the product development team. A lot of blockchains that are out there raised a bunch of money and they're literally ghosts. You can't get a hold of anybody. With Decent, I can pick up the phone at any time or hop on Telegram. I can get a hold of a project developer. I can ask him or her a question. I get an immediate answer. You really have that feeling of support and that they're there to help guide you along the way. With a protocol like Bitcoin, it's literally such a large and massive community that you're never going to get through to one of those core developers, so to speak.
Got it. Makes a lot of sense, and I think it's really helpful. So we have only a few minutes left in this segment, but I'd like to go to some questions from the Decent community. Your team put out a call for questions on social media and through some other channels, I guess, and we got some really great questions back that I'd like to dive into. However, this is going to be a bit of a lightning round because we only have a few seconds, really, and a whole bunch of questions. So I'm sure you guys can follow up with more detailed in the comments of the video and what have you to maybe dive into these or provide points where people can dig in a little bit deeper. But so I'm going to just give you some quick questions and hopefully some quick answers as we dive through these. So the first one, where can I start if I want to use D-Core to develop some cool D apps? What's the answer?
Yeah, so like I mentioned previously, go to docs.decent.ch. Just so the community knows, .ch is the Swiss domain extension, not Chinese. So
okay.
they're a Swiss-based company. I just say that because there's sometimes mistrust of going to Chinese websites.
Yeah, no, totally.
For a number of reasons. So I don't want our community to think that they're Chinese for any reason, although we do have offices in China. But docs.decent.ch has a great list and access to all of the software development libraries and ways to contact our developers.
So that's where to start. And if you do decide to go down that road, where can they meet other developers using D-Core?
Yeah, so meeting other developers using D-Core would be Decent hackathons are a great place to go. We sponsor a number of global hackathons, and hackathons in general are a great place to go if you're interested in blockchain development at all. You can go there, you can meet all sorts of people. Decent often sends its top advisors and ambassadors to these types of conferences to help mentor the developers to use our technology. And you know, the hackathons are really, I think, the place where the biggest organic growth is happening in the space at this time, where, you know, a newbie off the street, so to speak, can walk in, can immediately feel welcomed by the community and start making those important personal connections that will help advance his or her career.
So another question from the community: what do you think affects the DCT with market price, which I believe is your token, right?
Yeah.
The most, and does Decent care about it?
Well, the biggest driver of market price is always trading volume. So, you know, today's cryptocurrency ecosystem is highly automated. It's highly driven by trading volumes and robots who aren't even making true trades. In most cases, it's literally taking from one hand and putting it into the other. Do we care about high trading volume? I would say yes, but not to the extent that we're going to disrupt our roadmap. And our primary focus at Decent is to build the best digital media distribution product. And the best digital media distribution product that is coupled with a solid blockchain technology. So our core focus at Decent is working with partner companies like Cadoodle TV to help develop use cases for the industry at large. And we believe that through adoption of enterprise customers, eventually that market and trading volume will follow. But we're not going to go out and pay Binance to you know, list a coin to do a big marketing hype. It's a big waste of capital when we can be diverting that resource toward our product roadmap.
Fair enough. Last question. You have a very well-known in the blockchain world anyway, CEO. And so this question is, what's keeping him busy lately? And can you share some of maybe the future plans?
Yeah, for sure. So, I mean, Mathieu is actually on vacation, his first and most well-deserved vacation in over 3 years, which is good for him. A lot of people don't know this, but Mathieu is probably the busiest CEO within the cryptocurrency community. He makes over 200 flights a year. He manages an organization with offices on 3 continents. He's frequently traveling between the Shanghai office, the Bratislava office, the Hong Kong office, the Vietnam office, working with his staff to help build the next generation of D-Core products. Not only that, he's very strong with the community and with government organizations. So he does a lot of liaison to the blockchain community in general, to governments in general, helping to educate them about the benefits of blockchain and helping to grow the overall community globally.
All right, and that is a great way to wrap this up. Daniel, I'd like to thank you for joining me here today. This has been an eye-opening conversation for me, and I'm sure for everyone watching. Thank you for cutting through the hype and helping us see the blockchain in these real technical terms. It was great. Well, that's it for this episode. Make sure you watch the rest of the videos in this video series, exploring blockchain in the real world. I'm Charles Araujo, and for myself and Daniel, thanks for joining us.